Most things that are lost stay lost because no one was looking for them. Not because the record doesn't exist. Not because the evidence isn't there. But because a man walks into the woods with a notebook and a compass and doesn't come out, and the people who eventually go looking for him find the notebook and read what's in it and decide, quietly, collectively, without any formal discussion, that what is written there is better left where it was found. That is what happened with Everett Sohn. He was a surveyor. 37 years old, experienced, careful, the kind of man who had spent 15 years walking the back country of western North Carolina and far eastern Tennessee, and understood those mountains the way you can only understand them by moving through them on foot, season after season, until your body learns the terrain before your mind does. He disappeared in the fall of 1903. His notebook was found 11 days later, in a creek bottom in Madison County, North Carolina, in the headwaters country of the French Broad River, in a hollow that the local families called Lassiter Cove. He was not with the notebook. He was found 4 days after the notebook, a mile and a half further up the hollow. The condition he was found in, and the sketches in the notebook, and the writing that accompanied the sketches. The writing that changed character across the notebook's entries, the way a person's handwriting changes when they are very cold or very afraid, or when something is happening to the part of the mind that forms letters. All of it was seen by a small number of people. All of those people made the same decision. They put it back. It stayed put for a long time. This is what was in it. Everett Sohn had been hired in the late summer of 1903 by a land company based in Asheville that was doing what land companies did in western North Carolina in those years, identifying tracts of timber and mineral land, assessing their value, preparing the documentation that would allow the company to acquire them. This was common work in the region at the time. The mountains of western Carolina were being surveyed, bought, and logged at a pace that would transform the landscape within a generation, and the men doing the survey work were moving through terrain that had, in many cases, not been formally mapped. They were the edge of a system pressing into country that had existed outside that system, and many of them were aware of this in a vague way that they did not dwell on because there was work to do, and the work paid. Sohn had done this work for years. He was, by all accounts, good at it. He had a reputation for accuracy and for getting into difficult country that other surveyors declined or overcharged for. He was not a man who talked about what he saw on the job beyond what the job required. He had a wife in Asheville and 2 daughters, 7 and 9 years old. He wrote to his wife every few days when he was in the field. The letters, which his wife kept, and which eventually passed to one of the daughters and then to her own family, are matter-of-fact accounts of terrain and weather and camp conditions. They are not romantic letters, not particularly affectionate ones. They are the letters of a man who is accustomed to absence and has learned to communicate efficiently across it. The last letter, posted from a small community in Madison County on September 29, 1903, tells her he has one more section to survey, a hollow the locals call Lassiter Cove, and that he expects to be home by the 12th of October. He was not home by the 12th of October. He was not home at all. The first people to look for him were the local men he had hired to carry supplies into the hollow. He had sent them back to the nearest settlement on the 3rd of October, telling them he had enough for the remaining work and would come out on his own. When he had not come out by the 20th, they went back in. The notebook was found on the 23rd. One of the men, a man named Cletus Ashe, whose family had lived in that end of Madison County for 3 generations, later described the notebook's location. He said it was in the creek bottom, at the edge of the water, sitting on a flat rock as though it had been placed there. Not dropped. Not fallen from a pack. Placed, spine down, covers open, pages spread to the center. He said he almost didn't pick it up. He did not say why. He picked it up. He read enough of it to understand that whatever had happened to Everett Sohn was something that needed to be brought to more people than were currently standing in that creek bottom. He closed it. He brought it out. He showed it to the county sheriff, a man named Alton Ledford, and to 2 other men in the community whose judgment he trusted. All 4 of them read it. None of them spoke about what they had read for a long time. Ledford sealed the notebook in a tin box and put it in the back of a cabinet in his office, and did not file a formal report on its contents. When people asked about the Sohn case, and people did ask, the Asheville Land Company asked persistently. His wife asked. A colleague of Sohn's came to Madison County and asked. Ledford said the survey man had died of exposure in the back country, that the terrain was dangerous, that it happened. He was not wrong that it happened. He was not telling everything he knew. The notebook had 43 pages. The first 30 were unremarkable. Survey notes, measurements, compass bearings, small sketches of terrain features, the working record of a man doing his job. The handwriting is neat, consistent, professional. The dates run from September 29th, when he entered the hollow, through October 1st. On the 2nd of October, the character of the notebook changes. It doesn't change suddenly. That is the thing about it that the people who read it found most difficult to set aside. It changes gradually, across several entries, the way a temperature changes. You don't notice the degree of difference between any 2 adjacent moments, but when you compare the entry from the 2nd to the entry from the 8th, they do not look like they were written by the same person, or in the same state, or with the same relationship to the world outside the page. The entry for October 2nd is still legible, still professional, but contains one passage that is not survey work. He writes, "Heard something in the upper hollow last night after full dark. Not an animal I know. Have heard most of what lives in these mountains at night. This was not any of those. Noted it. Moved on." That is all for the 2nd. On the 3rd, he sent the supply men back. His note for that day records this decision without explanation. On the 4th, 1 line, "It was in the hollow again." Closer, on the 5th, 2 lines, "I have found tracks. I have been finding tracks for 2 days and was not certain enough to write it down. I am certain now. They are not bear. They are not any of the large things. I don't know what they are." On the 6th, the first sketch. Everett Sohn was a surveyor. He drew for his work. His drawings of terrain features throughout the first 30 pages of the notebook are precise and functional. The drawings of a man who renders the physical world accurately, because his livelihood depends on accuracy. The sketch on October 6th is different from those drawings in one significant way. It is not of terrain. It is of a print, a single print, drawn carefully, with a scale reference beside it, rendered in his usual professional manner. The scale reference is 4 inches. The print is 9 inches across. He has drawn the outline first, then shaded the depression, then added notations around the edges. The notations are measurements. He was being precise. He was doing what surveyors do, which is render the physical world in a way that can be communicated to someone who was not there. The print does not match the outline of any animal known to inhabit the southern Appalachians. Cletus Ashe, who had trapped that country his whole life, said that when he looked at the sketch, he felt that he understood each component part of the print individually, but that the components together made something that should not make the shape it made. He said, "It's like looking at words you know every letter of, but the word they spell isn't a word." He said he had looked at it for a long time, trying to make it into something familiar. He said he could not. The entries from October 6th through October 9th are the longest in the notebook. Sohn had, by this point, abandoned the pretense of continuing his survey work. The measurements and compass bearings disappear from the notes entirely. What remains is a record of observation and an attempt, increasingly strained, increasingly urgent, to describe what he was observing. He writes on the 6th, after the sketch, "It came to the edge of the camp last night. I did not see it directly. I saw the effect of it. The fire went very low. Not out, low, and the part of the dark where it was became a different kind of dark. I don't know how to explain this except to say that most darkness is the absence of light, and this darkness was something that was there. On the 7th, I have seen it. Briefly, at the tree line, just before first light. I am going to draw what I saw, and I need to be careful and accurate, because if I am not careful and accurate, then what I draw will be wrong, and a wrong drawing is worse than no drawing." Then the sketch. The sketch on October 7th occupies a full page and part of the following one. The people who saw the notebook did not describe the sketch in detail. Alton Ledford, the sheriff, said only, "It was a drawing of a thing that should not be in these mountains. That should not be anywhere." Cletus Ashe was slightly more specific. He said, "It was drawn like a man, in the sense that it was standing upright and had the arrangement of things in the places you'd expect. But the proportions were wrong in ways that were hard to count. I mean, you could look at any one part of it, and the part seemed right. But when you looked at the whole thing, the parts didn't add up to a right answer." A third man, unnamed in the account that has preserved these fragments, said only, "It looked back at you out of the page." He did not explain what he meant by this. He did not need to. The entries from October 8th and 9th are harder to read, not because the handwriting deteriorates dramatically, but because the sentences begin to come apart in ways that are subtle at first, and then less subtle. The grammatical errors are not the errors of an uneducated man losing his grip on language. They are the errors of a careful man whose attention is divided between what he is writing and something else. Something that is present as he writes. Something that is requiring a portion of the processing that normally goes toward constructing a sentence. On the 8th, it doesn't come at night only. I was wrong about that. It is, I don't know how to say this, it is present even when it is not present. I can tell when it is watching and when it is not watching, and the difference between those states is something I can feel in my body. Not fear exactly. More like the feeling right before you touch something you know is going to be very cold. The body already knows. Then, I have been trying to understand what it wants. I don't think wants is the right word. I think it is, attending to me. The way you attend to something you are studying. The way you look at a thing when you are deciding what it is. Then, in smaller letters, as though written quickly, I think it has decided. There is no entry for October 9th. There are more sketches. The sketches do not depict the figure. The sketches depict the hollow, the creek bottom, the ridge walls, the canopy. Normal terrain features rendered in Sohn's precise professional hand. But in each sketch, in the tree line, in the shadows at the edges, he has drawn something that is almost part of the background and not quite. Something that requires a moment of looking before you see it is there. Something that becomes, once you have seen it, impossible to unsee, so that looking at the sketch again means looking for it first, before anything else. In each sketch, it is in a slightly different position. It is closer in each one. Everett Sohn's body was found on October 27th, a mile and a half above where the notebook was found, in the upper hollow near the headwaters of the creek. The condition of the body was noted in the bare minimum of official language by Alton Ledford. The cause of death he listed as exposure, which Cletus Ashe later said was not accurate, but was the closest available category. He did not elaborate on what would have been more accurate. The body was brought out and returned to his family in Asheville. His wife was told he had died in the back country, that the terrain was difficult, that it happened to surveyors sometimes. She accepted this, because what else do you accept when a man goes into the mountains and doesn't come back? She kept his letters. She did not know about the notebook. The notebook stayed in Alton Ledford's tin box for years, in the back of the cabinet, and then in a trunk in the back of the building where the cabinet had been. As offices changed, and decades passed, and Ledford grew old and died, and the trunk passed to his family, and eventually to a great-nephew who found it while settling an estate, and did not know what to do with it, and contacted a man in Asheville who was known for collecting documents related to regional history. The man in Asheville opened the notebook. He read it. He closed it. He put it in his own storage. He told one person about it, a researcher he trusted. The researcher came to Asheville and read the notebook and said nothing for a long time. Then she asked if she could photograph the sketches. The man from Asheville looked at the photographs she had taken on previous visits to other collections. He thought about this. He said no. He said, some things, once they're in a wider circulation, can't be put back. She thought about this. She said she understood. She wrote about the notebook without the photographs, in a paper that was careful and precise, and that described the sketches the way the people before her had described them, each part separately, and the whole thing only by its effect on the people who had looked at it. She did not describe the figure directly. She wrote, "There is a category of encounter that the documentary record of Appalachian mountain communities returns to across generations and geographies, an encounter that is described always in terms of what it is not, always in terms of the effect it produces in the observer, rather than the features it presents to observation, and always with the particular reticence of people who understand that language, applied to this subject, does as much damage as it does good." She wrote, Sohn was a surveyor. He measured the world for a living. He rendered the physical in precise notations designed to communicate across distance and time. When he encountered something he could not render precisely, he did what surveyors do. He kept trying. She wrote, the last sketch in the notebook has no scale reference. She wrote, every other sketch he made in 15 years of survey work has a scale reference. She wrote, that is the thing I keep coming back to. She wrote, he didn't include one because it was the only sketch where the scale didn't matter. She wrote, it was right there. Lassiter Cove is still there. The families who lived at its mouth have mostly moved away over the generations. The timber was cut decades ago, and the second growth has come back thick and undifferentiated, the way second growth does. The creek still runs. The headwaters hollow is still there, steep-sided and dark even in the middle of the day. The kind of place where the light arrives late and leaves early. Cletus Ashe's family stayed in Madison County. One of his grandsons, an old man now, knows the story. He was told it by his father, who was told it by Cletus, who had put most of it away but kept a few details. The way you keep a few details from the things that change you, the ones you cannot discard entirely, because discarding them would be its own kind of lie. The grandson says he has never gone into Lassiter Cove. He was never told not to. He says he just never went. He says, you know how there are places where the land itself has a feeling, not a story attached to it. The feeling underneath the story. The thing the story grew from. He says, Lassiter Cove has that feeling. He says, I've been to a lot of places in these mountains, and I know the difference between a hard place and a place that is something else. He says, I've never needed to know what the something else is. He says, my grandfather saw the notebook. He didn't tell me everything that was in it. He told me enough. He was asked, what did he tell you? He was quiet for a moment. He said, he told me that whatever Sohn drew in that notebook, it wasn't looking at Sohn when Sohn drew it. He let that sit. Then he said, it was looking at whoever would look at the drawing later. He said, my grandfather said, you could feel it looking at you out of the page, like being looked at through a window from the outside. He said, that's why they didn't let the photographs be taken. He said, a window works in both directions. He said, they weren't worried about what people would see in the photographs. He said, they were worried about what the photographs would let out. Thank you for staying until the end. Everett Sohn went into the mountains to measure the world and found something the world had not given him a measure for. His notebook, the part of it that has been described, the part that was seen by the small number of people who made the decision to keep it where it was, is a record of a careful man running out of careful language, running out of scale references, running out of the professional distance that had served him for 15 years and that failed him. Finally, in the upper hollow, in the last days of September and the first days of October, in the year that was the last year of his life, what he sketched before he died is described, by everyone who saw it, in terms of what it was not. That is not evasion. That is accuracy. Some things are most precisely described by the shape of what surrounds them. Some things are most precisely located by the absence of a scale reference. Some things are looking at you out of the page. And some windows, once opened, are difficult to close. Sleep well.